How do you handle duplicates in Salesforce, and how do we eliminate them? That's our focus for episode 14 of The Brainiate Show.
Welcome to The Brainiate Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rockstar. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant, trainer, and MVP, David Giller.
Today, we're going to talk about duplicates. Nothing is more frustrating than looking for a contact in your database to find multiple entries for the same person. Which one do you click on? Which one is the most accurate? Is this person really a customer or a prospect? Which one has your latest notes? In this episode, I'm going to share with you some insight on how you can address this problem and solve it forever. If you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, YouTube, or any other podcast service that you prefer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Audible. Turn your boring commutes into entertaining, inspiring, and educational experiences with Audible. Everything from novels, biographies, to best-selling business advice are all available today. As an Audible affiliate, listeners to The Brainiate Show can download one free book today. Simply go to audible.brainiateshow.com to get started. That's audible.brainiateshow.com and get started today. So today I want to talk to you about duplicates and how do we handle duplicates in Salesforce. This is an incredibly common problem. In fact, it is not unique to Salesforce at all. We all struggle with the exact same issue of duplicates in Outlook, in Gmail, on our mobile phones. Because guess what? There are so many different ways to enter in either manually or sync these other systems to each other to integrate, let's say, our contacts on our mobile phone with our Yahoo, Google, AOL, Hotmail email accounts or work email accounts, let alone things like iCloud, where you can consolidate among all of your family members, all of your contacts, where the same contact can easily appear not only once or twice, but maybe 5 or 6 times. Maybe one time you have Mary and Bill Smith, and then you have separate contacts for Mary Smith and separate ones for Bill Smith. So we're all used to this topic, this frustration of duplicates in any system that we work with. So it is not unique to Salesforce. The question that we are going to talk about is, how do we handle duplicates in Salesforce? And I'm going to share with you some best practices. But in order to do that, we first need to break this down into 3 distinct topics. The first one is defining what is a duplicate. Next, let's get a better understanding of how does this happen. And then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. So the first thing is, what is a duplicate? On the surface, it seems incredibly simple and very straightforward. A duplicate is where we have the same person entered into the database more than once. Well, let's break that down even further. For contacts or for leads, it could be any combination of first name, last name, company name, address, phone number, zip code, date of birth, any other attributes that you might have for the person. For an account, generally it's 2 companies of the same name. Or is it? Because you could have multiple locations for the same company. Suppose you're tracking businesses, a business like Home Depot, and you might be tracking the different locations for Home Depot. You might also be tracking a headquarters versus subsidiaries. So you might be tracking Home Depot headquarters versus all of their distinct units, which could be stores, or it could be Home Depot commercial versus Home Depot residential. Let's face it, when it comes to what is a duplicate, think about yourself. And when you fill out any web form or stop by a booth at a trade show or sign up for a webinar, are you always consistently giving the exact same information for your current place of employment? Are you always listing the company in the exact same way? I can tell you for myself, when I first started working at NBC in about 2000, 2001, At the time, NBC was owned by GE. So if I were to fill out a web form, let's say to download a white paper or sign up for a webinar, I could, well, certainly I'd put in the first name and last name would be the same. My job title, generally speaking, would be the same. But as far as email address is concerned, or company of where I'm employed, I could have just as easily filled out NBC or NBC Inc. or NBC headquarters, or I could have filled out GE or General Electric. They all would have been the absolute truth. For my email address, I could have easily filled out david.giller@nbc.com or david.giller@ge.com. They were both my email address. They were both coming to the same inbox on Outlook. And I could have filled out either one. Maybe I filled out, there quite possibly were times where I filled out either GE or NBC, depending on which I thought was more beneficial to me in whatever it was that I was signing up for. Now, even within NBC, I could have distinctly put NBC headquarters versus any other subsidiary of NBC, like an owned and operated station or a division of NBC. So I might have put in NBC or NBC headquarters or NBC 30 Rock versus Burbank, because I was in 30 Rock. So we could very easily have many different flavors of the exact same person in the database, and it becomes incredibly hard to truly define what is a duplicate. And we're going to get to that in a little bit later on. So the first thing is, what is a duplicate? So a duplicate is, as I mentioned a moment ago, for context and leads, it could be any combination of first name, last name, company name, address, phone number. For an account, it would essentially be two or more entries in the database that truly represent the same company. Now let's talk about, how does this happen? Well, it happens in a couple of ways. Generally speaking, it happens, I think, in predominantly 4 ways. So the first is probably the most obvious: manual input. An employee who has access to Salesforce clicks the new button and creates a new entry. They're manually typing in a new entry in Salesforce without necessarily looking to see, does the person already exist in the database? So manual input. The second method is through web forms. Many companies that use Salesforce, and rightfully so, leverage different types of web forms, a contact us form on the website, or if you're a nonprofit, you might have a form where you're accepting donations from online, and you might have multiple web to lead forms or web to case forms. We might use one of many different tools that allow us to create forms online and have the data automatically get pushed into Salesforce. So through any type of web form, we could have someone who is already represented in the database is going to a website and filling out one of these forms, and now another entry for the same person or the same company is getting created in the database. So the first one is manual input. The second one is web forms. The third method is through integrations. Everyone gets all excited about integrating Salesforce with all kinds of tools. Outlook and Gmail and MailChimp and Constant Contact, Marketo, HubSpot, ERP systems, using Workato or Zapier to integrate Salesforce with practically anything that has an open API. And those are all pretty magical tools. They are. But with each integration comes the concern, the risk, the reality that we could very easily be creating duplicates in Salesforce. Let's just take one scenario. Let's take the scenario where everyone in the company is using Outlook and we are all synchronizing our Outlook contacts to Salesforce. And when we turn on this synchronization feature, all of us have John Smith in our Outlook because we all interact with him to some extent. Well, if we're all syncing him, and some of us might have his home address, some of us might have his work address, some of us might have his home phone number, we might have his home phone number and we placed it in the field called work phone number, or his mobile number and we placed it in the home phone number field, and each of us might have different versions of the same person entered into the database, and we're all synchronizing them into Salesforce, between Outlook and Salesforce. So each of us individually are pushing the same person record into Salesforce. So now if someone looks for that person in Salesforce, they will see not one, but maybe 5 or 12 different variations of the same person in Salesforce. Now imagine you have that, and then the same person is also entered into MailChimp or Constant Contact or a Marketo. And then that same person goes to the website and fills out a form. So we could easily escalate to have lots and lots of duplicates of the same person. So we really need to think through what we can do about it, which we'll get to next. So that's the third method of how duplicates happen, integrations. The fourth one is through batch imports. Now, when does this happen? This typically happens when we have, let's say, people who attended a webinar and we're using some type of system for tracking webinar registrants that's not necessarily tied to Salesforce, or we purchase a list of people who registered for a trade show, or people who stopped by our booth at a trade show. So we've got a bunch of maybe business cards that we've turned into spreadsheets, or maybe a new employee joins the team, and that employee provides us with a spreadsheet of their contacts that they would like to start working with and have entered into the database. So either way, we're talking about a spreadsheet that's getting imported into Salesforce, and it's now creating duplicates because some of these people might already exist in the database already. In fact, similar to what we talked about earlier with Outlook, we might have some of these people in the database already, but not an exact match in terms of their number might be placed in the mobile number field versus the home number. The office number might be in the mobile number field. The email address may or may not be identical. Some entries might be missing an email address. So we could have many different variations of the same records getting pushed into Salesforce through a batch import. So those are essentially the 4 different ways that duplicates happen in Salesforce. So now let's talk about what we can do about it. Well, the first thing we need to do is probably the most difficult. First, we need to define what truly is a duplicate. So if we have multiple entries, let's say for Fred Flintstone in the database, and one time he's entered in as Frederick Flintstone, and another time he's entered in as Fred Flintstone, another time he's entered in as Freddie Flintstone, and another time he's entered in as F Flintstone. And some of these entries may or may not have the same email address. And he might have started interacting with us when he had one job title, and then he got promoted a couple of times, so we have a couple of entries in the database where he has different job titles. Well, first of all, we need to figure out, are they the same or are they different? Because some might be the Fred Flintstone that we're thinking of, and others might be his cousin who goes by Frederick. And how do we know? Frederick might be working in the same place as Fred. I could tell you that working at GE, I certainly had lots of colleagues that had the same name. So how do we know if just because we have a first name and last name in the company that matches, are they truly the same person or are they not? And that is probably the most difficult aspect to decipher. And the truth is, how do you know? Well, the people who are closest to the data would be the best people to answer that. There is not a single app or system or magical formula that can help you define if they are the same person or not. Unless you have a true unique identifier, like a date of birth, like a Medicaid number, Medicare number, Social Security number, which you may or may not have depending on the type of industry you're in and the type of data that you're tracking in Salesforce. And by the way, even if you do have a Social Security number, a Medicaid number, and you have 2 entries for Fred Flintstone, the question still arises, which is, which one is the appropriate first name to keep? Which is the appropriate job title to keep? Who knows? Well, you're going to have to ask people in your organization, those who are closest to the data, in order to help figure that out, because there isn't going to be any system, any magical tool that can truly answer that for you. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to define which 2 or more records truly are duplicates. And then, once we find the duplicates, we need to figure out how we're going to decide which field is the most accurate and the most up-to-date to keep. Because of the different job titles, you only have one field for job title. You only have one field for phone number. You can't just mix everything in together, because then you will have nothing but another mess. So you need to figure out which job title, which phone number, which email address is the one that's going to survive the merge, to consolidate everything. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. So first, we can certainly use native Salesforce functionality to find and prevent duplicates. Many people are not aware of the fact that Salesforce has native functionality to help find and prevent duplicates. What are we talking about? So first, Salesforce has matching rules. Matching rules allow you to define what type of logic, based on what fields in Salesforce, what fields it should look for duplicates on leads, contacts, accounts, and any other object that you have in Salesforce. And then we have duplicate rules. The duplicate rules will essentially help you define how Salesforce uses the matching rules to handle the duplicates when it finds them. So in other words, you could choose to either block the new duplicate from getting created, or simply warn the user that they are about to save a potential duplicate. Now, we also have native Salesforce functionality to merge existing duplicates. So the matching rules and the duplicate rules help us to minimize new duplicates from getting created. But there's also functionality to merge existing duplicates. How do we do that? In Lightning Experience, we can use, it's referred to as the potential duplicates component. So it's a Lightning component that appears by default on the page layout for leads, contacts, and accounts. It's called potential duplicates. And it appears on the page layout in order to help us identify if Salesforce found potential duplicates when you're looking at any specific record in the database. In Salesforce Classic, when you click on the Accounts tab, on the lower right-hand side, you're going to see a section called Tools. And in that section, you're going to see a link called Merge Duplicates or Merge Duplicate Accounts. By clicking on that, it will help you to find and merge duplicates. So if you go into the Merge Duplicate Accounts, you can then search for any account name that you know of that has duplicates, and it will find all of the entries that match your search criteria, and it will allow you to select multiple account entries, and it will allow you to compare side by side all of the entries in every field to decide which entry should survive the merge process, and then to actually complete the merge process, to consolidate the contacts, the opportunities, the activities, to consolidate them to one newly consolidated account. In Classic, when you're looking at any account and you're viewing the contacts related list, so the section on the account screen where you can see all of the contacts for any corresponding account, you will see that there is a button in that contact section that's called Merge Contacts. So by clicking on the Merge Contacts button, so suppose you're looking at an account called Bedrock Inc., and you can see there that you have multiple entries, one for Fred Flintstone, another one for Freddie Flintstone, another one for Frederick Flintstone. You can click on the Merge Contacts button, and it will allow you to select multiple contacts within that account, and then to merge, you would first select which values, which entries in each of the fields for each of the records, which one you want to survive the merge. And it will then consolidate all of those duplicates that you've selected. And just like I described earlier, all of the corresponding activities will get merged into that one newly consolidated contact. In Salesforce Classic, when looking at any lead, you will see a button on the lead record itself. You will see a button that says Find Duplicates on the top of the screen, and it will allow you to find any contact, account, lead, or opportunity that could potentially match the lead record that you're looking at. So that's one way of using native Salesforce functionality in order to merge existing duplicates in the database. Now, something else we can do is we can handle it manually. What do we mean by that? Well, you could pull a report of all contacts, of all leads, of all accounts, and start listing them alphabetically to look for the duplicates. And once you find the duplicates, you can use any of the steps that I described earlier in order to merge them. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with doing a look over of your entries in the database, maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter, just to help for yourself to make sure that you don't have duplicates creeping up on your database. Now, lastly, we can use apps to automatically find and merge duplicates. I purposely left this option for last because most people assume that they need an app. Oh, I don't want to deal with the duplicates, just get me an app. Well, if any of us, because I know I've done this, if any of you have downloaded an app on your phone to find and merge duplicates, you know the horror that can come along with that. Where you have, let's say, Fred and Wilma Flintstone as one contact in the database in your phone, and then you have a separate one for Wilma and a separate contact entry for Fred, and using any of these merge duplicates tool, you now have 3 contacts become one, and now you can't separate, and you have absolutely no clue which phone number belongs to Fred and which phone number belongs to Wilma, and you don't know which one is whose birthday, because now everything is consolidated into one mess. So there are apps, and I'm not at all trying to knock any of the apps that are out there. There are many, many different apps out there to help to find the duplicates and to merge the duplicates. But no matter what app you use, before you jump to purchase any of the apps, you need to remember that with all of these apps, you will still need to do the following. You will still need to define what you consider to be a duplicate. So you need to define, is it an exact match on the first name and last name, on the first name and the email address? By the way, a lot of people automatically assume, oh yeah, email address is a unique record. You could always do that. Well, how many of you have had your spouse or child fill out an online form somewhere using your email address? And you know where I'm going with this. You could easily find yourself in a scenario where someone else fills out an entry with an email address that's not actually theirs, thereby completely messing up your data in the database. So you first need to define what you consider to be a duplicate. Then, using any app, you will need to define the consistent process that should be applied each time it finds a duplicate to merge them together, overwriting the details onto one record. So this holds true for job title and mobile number and email address, with all of the details that are on the other records. Now, most importantly, you need to be super comfortable using an app. You need to be super comfortable putting those rules on autopilot. Now, I can also tell you that of the many apps that are out there, I personally have used one in particular that I absolutely love. And by the way, I get nothing back for mentioning them right now. I personally love this tool, and it's called Cloudingo. Some of you might have not heard of it before. I will spell it out for you. Cloud, like the cloud in the sky, Ingo, I-N, N as in Nancy, G-O, Cloudingo. There are a couple of reasons why I love Cloudingo. Cloudingo will still require you to do the same things that I just described. So you will still need to be very specific in terms of defining what you consider to be a duplicate. And then you will still need to define exactly what you want the tool to do once it finds the duplicate. So you can choose things like just apply whatever was in the older record or whatever was in the newer record or whichever record was created by Joe on my team. You could define exactly which record should be considered the master to overwrite whatever was populated in the other entry or entries. So you will still need to do that even with Cloudingo. One of the beautiful things, from my perspective, one of the beautiful things about Cloudingo, there are a couple of beautiful things. One is that it's relatively inexpensive compared to it's not free compared to many of the other tools out there. It is relatively inexpensive. I should have looked it up, but I'll say it's approximately $2,000 for the company for the year. It's a little bit more than $2,000 for the company for the year. So first of all, from a cost perspective, it's, I think, reasonable. And the other thing is, Cloudingo puts it on autopilot and does not prevent the duplicate from getting created. And there are many, many scenarios where we do not really, truly want a duplicate from getting created. What am I talking about? Because usually people say, no, just stop the duplicate from getting created. That'll solve the issue in the first place. Not always. Because what happens when a prospect goes to your web forum and fills something out and says, contact me immediately. I am really interested in your products and services. And that person happens to be in your database already. Do you truly want your system to block that new entry from getting created? No, you don't. If you're a nonprofit and you're taking in web donations, do you truly want that a repeat donor should have their donation rejected because they're already in the database? No, you don't want that to happen. So with Cloudingo, the duplicate will in fact get created. However, with Cloudingo, you can set it on autopilot and put it on its schedule. You could put it on a schedule to say at 1 a.m. every day, just run the magic of looking for the duplicates. So look for any leads that were created in the last day and look for a match based on whatever criteria you define for existing contacts in the database and automatically merge them. And again, you still have to define precisely what rules should apply to match those to consolidate, to merge those duplicates. Now, I have no doubt that many people who are listening to this podcast work for a company that has some type of a solution, some type of app to help solve for duplicates in Salesforce. And each time I post something online regarding any topic where apps can get involved, many app developers enthusiastically chime in and post how their app is the best for solving a particular problem. If you are working for a company that has an app to solve the problem for duplicates in Salesforce, you can feel free to reach out to me at dgiller@brainy8.com to discuss opportunities to either come on to the podcast or we can create a YouTube video together walking through your app and discussing how it solves for this problem. Because you know what? Even if it's an app that I've never heard of before, not only would I appreciate learning about it, but I have no doubt that my listeners, my audience, would also appreciate learning about it to have a better understanding of all of the options that are available out there to help solve for the painful issue of having duplicates in the database. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Brainy8 Show. If you found this episode helpful, feel free to share it with others on LinkedIn or Twitter. If you have additional thoughts on the topic covered today, go ahead and drop me a note, as I would love to hear from you. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and make sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Make sure to check out the show notes for links to any resources that I mentioned during this episode. Also, head over to brainy8.com and check out my blog with additional resources to help you become a Salesforce rockstar.